I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I'm really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening and whenever it is that you might be listening in. This episode today is sponsored by my friend Kristen Myers. Kristen is a new supporter of this show, so thank you, Kristen. Kristen is sponsoring me through Patreon. Patreon is a platform where folks who listen in, fans, friends, family, you can go to Patreon and offer monthly financial support of this show and everything really that I'm trying to do, the stories I'm trying to share through 21047.com. Patreon is the place where you can go and offer that financial support. So thank you, Kristen. If you want to learn more about Patreon and how you can get involved with this support, you can go to my website, 21047.com, TWOTIM 47.com. Click on the Support Me tab, and there you'll find a link to Patreon. You can just go there and learn more about what Patreon is and how that support helps me out. So, Kristen's support today is helping me with a very cool story I get to share. I was on the internet not too long ago and ran across this story about a world record setter, Gene Dykes. Gene, 70 years old, had just run a marathon in Jacksonville in under 3 hours, 2 hours and 54 minutes and some change. Gene, at 70 years old, breaking the 3-hour mark to a guy like me, 54 years old, headed to Houston here in a couple of weeks, trying to break the 6-hour mark for the first time. So you can say that story was intriguing, at least. So I reached out to Gene, and turns out Gene loves to talk about running, loves to get on air or wherever he can get and just share what running has done for his life, with some hopes of maybe inspiring other folks to join this running journey too. And so we had a great, about an hour-long conversation. Just a lot came out that really it's been beneficial to me to think about in the aftermath. Just some things that I really hadn't considered. Number one, a coach. Gene spends a lot of time talking about how the coaching aspect has made him the runner he is. He called himself an ordinary Joe without his coach. Gene's out there running 2 hour and 54 minute marathons. I don't think he's given himself enough credit, but nonetheless, he really speaks to the value of the coach. And then there's just a lot of insight. So I want to, as quick as I can, get you over to my conversation with Gene. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Here is my conversation with Gene Dykes. I want to welcome Gene Dykes to the 21047.com podcast. So welcome, Gene.
Well, great to be here. Everybody knows I love to talk about running.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to talk about today. And specifically starting off, I was just browsing through the internet the other day, and I saw this headline about this 70-year-old man that had just run a 2 hour and 54 minute and 23 second world record marathon for a 70-year-old. Now, let me preface that by saying I am headed to Houston in January as a 54-year-old man, trying to get a little redemption because last year I could not run a 6-hour marathon there. So you can imagine how floored I was when I read a 70-year-old man running a world record marathon. So one of the very first questions I want to ask you, Gene, is when and how did you even get started in this whole running journey?
Oh, I guess you could say I've had two running careers. One started way, way back in about 1960, I think. Well, I just decided to go out and run one day, and I made it about a mile and a half before I had to start walking, and I totally cursed myself for walking, and I promised I would never do that again. And actually, I held that vow for a long time until I discovered trail racing, where there's lots of good reasons to walk. So I ran track in high school and college. And high school, I thought I was hot stuff. And in college, I was blown off the track by everybody, teammates, competitors alike. And that left me with a lifelong impression that I was not a very good runner. And so I picked up other sports to concentrate on. I got to be a pretty good golfer and bowler. But I enjoyed running, so I jogged my life, but I certainly didn't burn myself up racing. So that was running career number one. It ended in my late 40s when I was jogging with somebody, and I said, I think I'll sprint in and beat him back to the finish line. And I tore my hamstring. I couldn't run for 6 years. I tried every year. It would hurt. I'd have to stop. So that pretty much sealed the deal for my casual running career. I then picked it up again when I fell in with a bad crowd at age 56. These guys did a lot of racing, and they encouraged me to get back into it. I did a few races, found it to be a lot of fun, and that's what kickstarted it.
Now, kickstarted, like I said, you just ran a 2 hour and 54-minute marathon as a 70-year-old man, which is flying by any age standard. At what point in the second career did you realize, I may be pretty good at this thing now?
Okay, I've been racing for 12 years now, and for the first 7 of those, I had an idiot for a coach, myself, of course, and I improved slowly, but I didn't really think I needed a coach. I mean, everybody knows how to run. You don't need somebody to tell you how to run, and certainly not pay them to do that. But my time seemed to be leveling out. In fact, I had hoped to get a new PR at the Toronto Marathon 5 years ago, and I missed it by 13 minutes. Just obviously looked like I was heading the wrong way. And I hired a coach as a 5-month trial to see what he could do for me before the Boston Marathon. And he did amazing things. I went from 3:29 to 3:09 in just 5 months. So he's definitely been my coach ever since. And I've improved every year since then.
So I'm curious, Gene, I have to confess my coach right now is an idiot because he is me. And
yeah.
so
and he
when
has an idiot for a client.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm curious because I've never considered hiring a coach. What was it about this coach you think, and I'm not looking for coaching secrets, but generally speaking, what did he or she provide for you that kind of made a difference?
There are probably a lot of good coaches out there, and they'll all have in common the fact that they'll understand what you're capable of. They'll know the right workouts to make you reach what you're capable of. But there are a lot of those. The second part is a little more esoteric. I think you have to have the right mindset. And mine is, I would rather die than tell my coach I couldn't do one of his workouts. So there's a huge amount of accountability there. In addition to him knowing the right workouts, the fact that he's counting on me to do them, gets me out of bed in the morning, gets me, I'll start the watch. And without a coach, even if I could dream up the right workouts, there's no way in the world I could make myself do them. It's always beyond me that he knows better than I do what I'm capable of. And I just do what he tells me.
So is running an everyday thing for you, Gene? Again, you're 70. I've read a lot lately, even for a guy my age, 54, they start talking about incorporating more rest and your body needs more recovery. Is this an everyday thing for you as far as training and your coaching, or do you find you have to incorporate extra rest and recovery time? And does your coach ask you to incorporate more rest?
Well, I was totally in tune with your mindset those first 7 years. I could, I kind of felt like I had one foot in the grave and nobody would tell me which foot it was so I could take it out. So I always thought after a hard workout and I was sore that I'm older now. I need to rest until, the soreness goes away. And no, the coach was having nothing of that. He immediately had me running 5 to 6 days a week. And at much quicker pace. I think I was doing fewer miles than before, but real high quality miles and day after day running when I was tired. It's I think that turned out to be a part of it. So now I run 5 to 6 days a week, 6 days when I don't have a race. So there'd be one rest day in there, and 5 days if I do, usually a rest day before and a rest day after. I run almost every weekend, so I ran 43 races last year. So it's usually 5 days a week, but real high quality miles almost every day. Say 2 of those 5 workouts will be recovery run pace. Nothing really strenuous, but the others will be something that's getting me to the next level.
Wow. And outside of running, I read a lot and folks are, adapting their diet to kind of boost their performance. Do you have a special diet or do you just eat what you want to eat?
Yeah, seafood diet. You put it in front of me and it's down the hatch. That's the hardest part of training. It's 2 seconds per pound per mile, which isn't that important if you have a weight you're comfortable with and maybe you just want to beat your PR. But if you're trying to set records, it's really important, and I hate it. I have to keep my weight down, or there's just no way I can train enough to offset that. So I eat anything in moderation, and with a race coming up, I'll even try and keep that moderation moderated so I can lose a little weight. Oh, another thing I think I do is I get plenty of sleep. I really think a lot of people don't get enough sleep, and it's hard for your body to recover if you're not getting that rest. The most important thing, though, that I see is that there are no silver bullets. People think, if I can just find the right stretches, if I can find the right diet, if I can find the right cross training or supplements, core strengthening, I'll be a great runner. And, fine, do those if it makes you feel good. But I think they take energy away from running, personally. I don't do any of those. And I just run. That's sort of the working title of a book I'm never going to get around to writing. Just run.
You recently set a world record. And I think that was something you were chasing after. Has goals been a part of your life from the time you were a kid? Just this whole chasing excellence, chasing records, or has running kind of brought this into your life?
I guess I've always been competitive. I always want to try hard. Rarely had the goal of being the best there ever was. And mostly it was, if I'm playing a game, I want to do the best I can. Learn the rules and put in the effort. But running was the first time, I guess, I found myself at a level where it wasn't just about, doing my best and trying to beat that guy in the mirror from what he did the year before. Yeah, the records help. I don't want to be a world record holder so much as attaining the goal that I set for myself. And once I saw that it was possible, I said, well, I'm going to try and do that. and having done that was very satisfying. But no, if chasing records was the goal, see, I'm already toast. Ed Whitlock, has so many. I'll never be on the same page as that guy. I mean, even if you count the one that I just ran, let the record show that it's Ed Whitlock 35 world age group records. Gene Dykes 1. So got to keep things in perspective.
Right, right. Well, your one is, like I said, pretty amazing to me. I was reading that you also seem to have a fairly significant interest in the trails and some ultra distances. Curious where that interest comes from, and how much does the trail running benefit you in terms of these road marathons and other races you do?
Okay, if I don't get around to all of those points, remind me, but a lot of really good points in there I'd like to talk about. Ever since I discovered running, I guess you could say I've had sort of two parallel running careers, running through it. In one, I would try and improve my road racing every year over year, and in the other, I wanted to have more fun and keep going further and further in trail running. When I hired a coach, I think he probably thought that those were two lines that didn't work together all that well. He probably beat his head against the wall every time I signed up for another ultra trail race. But I think he's come around to the idea, and I have too, that they're complementary. My ultra running has helped my marathoning, and my marathoning, if maybe not helping as much as concentrating on ultra running, but it certainly enables me to go further and have a lot of fun. So let's see, the progression was, I started out by doing adventure runs. I got my family to go out on a little, sort of like a stage race, except it wasn't a race, it was just a supported thing. We went around some big mountain range, and great time. My daughter and I did it around Lake Tahoe. And then I started doing stage races. I tried to find longer ones and ones that took longer and went further. Then I started doing individual races that went longer, 50 miles, 100 miles. And when you keep trying to do something more gonzo than the year before, it gets pretty hard to top yourself. Last year, 2 years ago now, I ran 3 200-milers in 3 months, and I'm not sure how I can outdo that in the coming year, but I'm going to give it a go because it's just so much fun. And if my theory is right, doing these big ultras this spring will help me to make another good record attempt later this year or next year.
So you plan to run 3 200-mile races in 2019. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, that's what I did in 2017. In 2019, I may concentrate more on yearly quantity than, just to give you a hint of what I'm looking for this year, I'm going to do 2 50-milers in January, 3 weeks apart. And then a week after that second 50, I'm going to do a 100-miler. And 2 weeks after that, I'm going to do a 200-miler. So that's 4 50s, 100 and a 200 in a span of 7 weeks. And I guess I'm hoping to convince myself that that's comparable to doing 3 200-milers in 3 months.
I'm speechless. That's a heck of a start to the year.
I like to kickstart the year. There's a lot more coming up after that. In fact, including, you said you were going to do Houston in a couple weeks?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get into that race. Not having any success yet, but I'm still trying. I think I'm in good enough shape that I could give that record another shot at Houston. So we'll see what happens. I'll let you know.
Oh, please let me know if you get in. I'd love to touch base with you in Houston if you get in.
Well, it's kind of an opaque website, and I had make a phone call and just talk him into trying to find somebody with a friendly ear to see if there's some way they can get. But they may have the rules. Their hands may be tied. There just might be no way to get somebody in after the race is sold out.
How long is it going to take you to run 200 miles, Gene?
Oh, it takes me about 4 days. The winners can do it in, say, 2.5 to 3 days. You run when you can and walk when you can't and nap when you have to. Believe it or not, it's not the distance that's the problem. It is the time. You run along, and after about 70 or 80 miles, it's the equivalent of bonking. You've pretty much run out of glycogen, and your speed slows down to accommodate the fact that your body isn't producing energy like it used to. And well, there's nothing worse than bonking, so you just keep on keeping on after that point. But you just can't keep on keeping on without some sleep. And you might go 24 or 36 hours before your first nap, and you nap for a couple hours, and then you keep going, and then sometimes you'll just grab a 5-minute nap on the trail and keep going. You can't nap too much. I think I got maybe 2 hours sleep a night at those 200s, and all of them I beat the cutoff by no more than an hour or two. So it's not like you can sleep 8 hours and catch up and then head out there again. I think it adds to the experience, though. When you go out and you're sleep deprived and totally immersed in the experience, it really, penetrates your psyche in a way that, it's hard to say it, but everybody ought to do one. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, I have a goal of venturing in that direction this year. It's certainly not going to be 200 miles, but I have an interest in running a 24-hour race, and mainly that is the intriguing part, is that to me, I've never run and had sleep deprivation factor in there. Not that going those sort of distances need additional challenges, but there is something intriguing to me about that whole, you said psyche, just that mental component in there, having to battle through that piece.
That's interesting you should say that. On the trail, I don't have this problem of battling. It's just so much fun. Quitting has never been an option. But when you're doing these races against time, these 24-hour races or multiple loops on a track or a 1-mile loop, yeah, the mental aspect really gets there, because you're never more than a mile away from being able to quit, and it's something you have to find your own path to keep you going. Up to 24 hours, I wouldn't worry about sleep. You might think, oh, gee, I remember when I tried to do an all-nighter in college, and I couldn't stay awake for 24 hours, but you really don't need all that much brain power to run. Might even be a little disadvantageous, but yeah, anybody can go 24 hours running. I don't think very few people feel that they need sleep. I even went 48 straight hours in a race once without sleep. Actually, I went 70 hours in a row once in a race without sleep, but I tried to anyway in that race.
Gene, do you have any friends or family who say, Gene, you're getting too old for this?
Well, I don't know. The counterfactual is too obvious, I guess. So no. I really don't feel old. If anybody says I am, it just rolls off me like, off a duck's back.
Well, I would think there's a lot of credibility in saying I ran 3 200-mile races in 2017. That puts a lot of people in their place pretty quick, I would think.
Yeah, well, more people can do that than they think. Most people have never tried. They say, how can you do that? I couldn't do that. I said, have you tried? No. Well, there you go. You'll never know until you try. It's clearly not something that many people can just go out and do, not having trained up to it. Yeah, and I was telling the story of a young woman I met at a 100-miler, whom when I asked her, well, how many hundreds have you done? She says, oh, this is my first one. I said, oh, great. And she says, in fact, I've never run more than 13 miles in my life. And she went on to run. She finished 100 in 27 hours, totally respectable. And I found that hard to believe. So when I got home, I checked up on her on Athlinks, and indeed, she had never run a race over 13 miles before. And this shows that some people can just get out there and do it. The rest of us might take a few years, but as long as you just try and do something a little longer each year, you're forced to start doing things that would seem impossible just a few years before.
So I'm curious if you had to choose one, because it is interesting. You talked about your coach thinking those were sort of two different running paths. And I last year started venturing more into ultra running and trails, and you meet the trail runners and that's their deal. They have no interest in being out on a road and running a marathon. You seem to be unique in this kind of balancing both. Or one of them, do you prefer one over the other?
Okay, well, when people ask me, what surface do you like running on the best? And I said, well, I think my best surface is indoor track, outdoor track, roads, trails, cross country, you name it. I mean, I don't like to limit myself that way. But if I had to give up racing marathons for world records or doing big trail races, you could kiss those records goodbye. I'm never going to give up going out and having a great trail run.
What is it about the trails? Is it just the outdoors? Is it nature? Has that always been something that's been a part of you?
I suppose. I've always been attracted to scenery. A vacation for me is mountains. Going to a city is, just see, why would anybody want to go see a bunch of buildings when you could go out and run in the trees and the mountains and the streams? So yes, it's a wonderful excuse. I mean, in these 200-mile races, these 200-milers, by the way, are not loops. I mean, it's a single loop or a point to point. You're seeing something new the entire way. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. How much of what you do, Gene, do you have any interest in what you're doing being an example to other folks who are getting up there in age and them realizing that age is just a number?
Well, to a little bit, but since I don't really feel old, I don't feel like I'm addressing the age is just a number. I'm more trying to convince everybody, no matter what their age, that there's more that they can do than they think. And running is a big world out there. We've touched on racing against time, road racing, track, trail running. If they haven't tried trail running, absolutely give it a go. You might just say, I can't believe I spent all that time on those roads. It's really a different kind of thing, because even when you're racing a trail race, it's not the pounding that you get in a road race. It's easier. It lasts longer. You can get pretty tuckered out, but all in all, it's easier to trail run than it is to run on a road. You're running slower. The gait is varied. It's more interesting. So, give it a go.
Yeah, like I said, you're unique in that so many of the trail folks I come across, their experiences, oh my goodness. Once I found the trails, I decided I was never running on a road again. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on that. Has this sort of second running career, sounds like it's just, I don't know, it sounds like it's been somewhat life-changing to you the last 12 years. Has it changed your perspective or filtered over into other areas of your life as you've gone these further distance and discovered you are capable of maybe things you didn't know you were capable of?
Well, it's an interesting question. I'd say running is just another example of a life lesson I learned long ago. First time I learned that lesson, I was in college, just finished my freshman year and was not at all certain that I was in the right major. I went to see the dean and told him that I just didn't know what I should study. And he says, well, what did you enjoy studying in high school? And I said, well, I like biology. So he says, so why aren't you studying biology here? And to me, it was like kind of a revelation. Well, of course you should study what you enjoy instead of just studying what you think you ought to. So I immediately changed majors, and when something else became more interesting, I changed majors again. And which is the second life lesson is, no matter how much you're throwing yourself into something, keep open to new opportunities. And doing that, I managed to finally find the major that interested me. But even that ended up not being what I went into in life, because I just went to a computer programming seminar. I really didn't know what computer programming was, but I said, let's go see what it is. After just that seminar, changed my whole life. I spent my whole life computer programming, even though my PhD was in biochemistry. So always keep open for new opportunities, and when you are into something, throw your energy into it. You got to limit the things you throw all your energy into, but I think most people would find it easy to just pick one or two things and really go after them. Another thing is, if you find that there's things that you like but can't throw all your energy into it, and running was for me. I loved it, but just because I didn't think I was any good at it, and because I didn't have a lot of time, I didn't throw myself into it. But it's something you can do later on. Don't force it. Maybe not now, but maybe in the future. Even for you right now, you're late 40s, you can get an
early
introduction
50s
to
or mid 50s
or mid 50s. But even even at this late date, so to speak, you might find that you don't have the time to throw yourself into it like you can. So you can just do it kind of at a low level, and when the time is right, then you can break out and just go after it. And I guess running all of a sudden became the right time in my life to do it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, no, and I'm assuming you're retired, Gene?
6 years now.
No, because that
helps a lot.
Right, that's one of the questions folks are always curious about is, my goodness, this guy's going to run 3 or 4 50-milers here, 100-miler, 200-miler in the first 2 months of this year. Where on earth does he get the time to do that? My guess is that when you're running that sort of a race schedule to start the year, there's not much training in between. It's just race and recover.
You'd be surprised. Some people claim that recovery is my superpower. For instance, the Jacksonville Marathon, where I ran that quick time, that was just 2 weeks after I ran a 50K on Saturday and a competitive marathon on Sunday. And I told myself going into it, that's probably lots of time to recover. And I'll do it again. If I get into Houston, I'll be doing it on just 2 weeks rest after a 50-mile trail race. So you can train yourself, I think, to recover fast. A lot of people just don't realize it. The best way to train yourself is the most fun way, which is to do an adventure run or a stage race. There, you can cover miles that you wouldn't have thought possible. 140 miles in 6 days. You say, "Oh, I'm going to be so beat up by the end of it." Turns out your body is already learning to recover during that time. By the 6th day, you're stronger than when you started. It's amazing. Makes you almost wonder about the value of rest when you can go out and do a stage race and feel better at the end than at the beginning.
Right. I read where you had made the comment, and I've thought about this myself a little bit and even though I've been running only for, I guess, 4 or 5 years now, I've done it almost completely injury free. And I think, and I read somewhere where you had said you think it's helped that you kind of took up this running later in life. You didn't have a lifelong pounding on your legs and joints that some younger runners do. You got anything to add to that? Or I found that to be a curious piece.
Oh, for sure. A lifetime of hard running is probably the best leading indicator that you won't be competitive when you're older. I mean, you might look at somebody, two people in their 30s, and say, look, this guy just won an Olympic gold in the marathon, and here's a guy who's never run in his life. My money would be on the guy who's never run in his life when it comes around to being better at age 60 or 70. All I have to do is look at every winner of a major marathon who's now about my age. I have to ask the question is, well, where are they now? When I was their age, I wasn't fit to tie their shoelaces, and I'll never be fit to be spoken of in the same sentence as they. But the fact is, they're nowhere now. It's just too hard a thing to be competitive your whole life. So you have to pick your battles. For some people, my best advice about being a good runner when you're old is to stop running. Well, not stop being competitive. Essentially what I did, I just jogged my whole life. I never got out of it, but just jogging, that's not going to beat you up like trying to run fast races all year long.
How long do you plan to run? Do you ever think about stopping, or is this just something day after day? This is just who you are and you're going to keep doing it?
Oh, I tell people that my long-term goal is to win the 120 to 124 age group at Boston. So never know. But as I said, keep out for new opportunities. And besides, you're always only one injury away from retirement. So when that time comes, I have every confidence I'll find something else to completely throw myself into. Of course, I think my wife hopes that will be cleaning up the messes I leave around the house, but I hope she does not holding her breath.
What is your wife a runner?
No, she isn't. She works real hard. She works and I play. It's a pretty good deal that way. She's beginning to think about retirement, but I think that's several years away yet. She's really good at what she does, and she enjoys it still. Both my daughters run, though. My younger daughter, I've run many marathons and adventure races with. My older daughter, I ran her first marathon with her. And that gives me a good excuse to go visit them. One lives in San Francisco and one lives in Minneapolis. And I made it my vow every year to make a special trip to each place, in addition to any other trips I might make, to run a race with them. So it's always high on my list of things to look forward to each year.
Yeah, that makes it cool when it can be a family affair. I read, Gene, and this is going to surprise some people that I had interest in this, but one thing I've battled, especially in the heat, I just don't do well running in the heat, and a lot of that has had to do with nutrition and hydration. And last summer, I was introduced to Morton's, and that was a game changer for me. And I had read in one of these articles where you had a similar experience. I'm not trying to product endorse here, but I just found that to be interesting.
I think the best way to describe it is it's a game changer. I've always run fairly lean because I just can't tolerate anything in my system. I used to take some other manufacturers' powdered stuff that I would mix with water and drink during the race, and I couldn't get more than 200 calories of that stuff down before, I would feel yucky, and I wouldn't be able to tolerate anymore. It was the day after the Toronto Marathon where I came up 25 seconds short of the world record. I think if I had discovered Morton the day before, I think I'd have had the record there, because instead of getting in 200 calories, I was able to get in 800 calories during the race. And that can certainly prolong your output in a marathon. I first used it at the California International Marathon and discovered that not only was I not queasy after gobbling a whole bunch of calories of it, I was actually feeling hungry toward the end of the race. I mean, my body was clearly tolerating this, and it worked great at Jacksonville.
Yeah, no, like I said, my experience was exactly the same as yours. I've tried all the drinks, couldn't keep any of them down. And this, like you said, I just was able to get a lot more calories in me and just sustain my effort much better than I ever had.
Of course, if you're doing ultras, though, I should caution that, yeah, I probably would have been better at ultras with it. But I used to have really bad nausea, and I thought it was just something that affected me. And I went for all the silver bullets, ginger and this and that, and electrolytes, and who knows what all. It turned out that once I got better conditioned, the nausea went away. And it could be that you'll get nausea even with Morton because you're pushing your body past where it's able to go. And if you do, there just aren't silver bullets. You're just trying to go faster or further than your body's trained to do.
Yeah, and that's helpful because I think last year that certainly that was the case with me. I was trying to go distances I never had, and it just wasn't working well for me. Both the races I tried that in, like I said, it was just really hot and humid, which just never goes well with me.
This may not work for everybody, but another thing I've always said is you can race just as well as you're trained for. And I used to think I was terrible in the heat. Well, I probably really was. So I entered a stage race in the desert specifically to train myself to run in the heat. And it was a 6-day stage race. And I kid you not, it was 115 degrees at the finish line on the last day. I've never had trouble running in the heat since. Lots of races I'll do, everybody was saying, oh man, how'd you run that time? It was so hot. And I was sort of like, it was hot. I really didn't notice. So you can train yourself to run in the heat. You can train yourself to run without electrolytes. You can train yourself to run long distances. You can train yourself to run faster. You just can't do what you're not trained to.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Do you have a bucket list, Gene? I mean, you've run, so many distances, clearly so many different races. Is there something out there that even Gene dreams of doing that maybe you haven't yet?
As I say, it gets pretty tough to top 3 200s in 3 months. I mentioned my January and February goal this year with those 250s, 100, and a 200. But yeah, I've got a lot to look forward to in 2019. I usually plan out the coming year in November and December of the year before. And this is what I've come up with. I'll just throw it out there just to show what you guys can look forward to in retirement. I mean, obviously, tough to do this when you don't have a lot of time on your hands. But after those 2 months of ultras, I'll do my marathon training in March, and I'm expecting that I'll be able to leverage that base into some good times. I'm going to run Boston and Big Sur in April, both with my daughter, by the way. So we're going to do that together. I'm hoping to run real strong marathons there, but hasten to add, they're not record eligible because they're both point-to-point races. And then in May, I'm going to do 24 hours on a track to try for the 100-mile and 24-hour age group records. If anybody wants a great idea for their first 50-miler, I'm doing the Cayuga Trails 50 in June, and what a wonderful race that is. Normally, I'll just pick a new race every year to go to, but this is on my calendar every year. It's just an amazing run. Incredible scenery, wonderful trails, well-run race, the Cayuga Trails 50 in Ithaca, New York, June 1st.
I will look into that.
July, excuse me?
I said I will look into that.
Oh, it's just great. There are probably lots of other good 50-milers out there, but like a lot of people seem to like the JFK 50. It's a famous race, but it's got to be way boring compared to the Cayuga Trails 50. There are 2 states I haven't been to. I'm not planning on doing a race in every state, but I do plan to use races to get those last 2 states I've never been in. And in July, I'm going to do a 100-miler in North Dakota on the Madahe Trail, and really looking forward to that. I'm going to do something gonzo in September, but I haven't decided yet, either a 24-hour race or a big stage race or another 100-miler. And then in October and November, a couple sort of like destination marathons, Mount Desert Island and New York City. New York City was my first marathon. I've done 110 since then. It'll probably be about number 120 by the time I get to it in November. And of course, that's just the backbone of my year. I try and run a race every weekend. I ran 43 races in 40 weekends last year. So, yeah, I hate those pesky open spots on a calendar.
You have a busy year, and you know the when I read the headline, you know, the world record marathon, I had no idea. I mean, your real strength is in these long endurance runs. I mean, you're clearly fast, but as you went through your calendar, it's amazing to me how many 50, 100, 200-mile races you have on the horizon.
Well, I just kind of wear two hats. There's a season for ultras and there's a season for marathons. I found that, I probably can do really well in a marathon if I train specifically for it for 12 weeks. But I found 6 to 8 weeks is plenty if you've got a great base going in. I think a lot of the 12 to 16-week programs are trying to build up that base while they're trying to improve your marathon speed. If you already have the base, which I love to get in trail running, then you can leverage that into a fast marathon in a relatively short period of time.
As we roll into, we're 2 days into the new year, and listening to you, you've said several times in a few different ways that people really can do more than they think they're capable of. If there's folks out there that are hesitant to get out and try something new this year, what sort of advice or encouragement would you give them, Gene?
Yeah, well, there's so many sayings that apply to that. You'll never know unless you try. And my main advice is, look at that person in the mirror and say, whatever you did last year, I'm going to do better this year. And and don't be distracted by some of the conventional wisdom I say. A lot of my advice is on the don't do that side of the equation. You'll hear so many articles and this and that says you absolutely have to stretch, you have to cross-train, you have to do core strengthening. Well, I don't do any of that. I do just fine, thanks. If you enjoy them, fine. But personally, I think they take energy away from the main event, which is running. So I don't do them.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it was Des Linden that I was listening to on a podcast, and they were trying to drill down into her silver bullets, as you said, and she basically said, "I just run." Maybe I'd do a massage here and there, but I have found no better training technique ever than just running, and it sounds like that's you too.
Maybe I already said that the working title of the book I'm never going to get around to writing is Just Run.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense, and it sounds like you would definitely support, if you're serious about this, having a coach in your corner as well. Yeah,
there's so much more you can do in running. If you're really interested in speed and you don't have a coach, well, you just haven't brought to bear the most important thing to getting faster. I am just Mr. Joe Ordinary without a coach, I guarantee you. And to some extent, I really don't think there's much special about me except that I have a great coach. And on the trail running side, it's just a matter of, picking out some fun race that might be an incomprehensible distance to you, but you don't have to finish first. You just have to finish. And the cutoffs on most trail races are very generous. In fact, people ask me, who do you admire the most? People I admire the most are those guys out there doing a long stage race or a long 100-milers who are way back there at the back of the pack. I mean, these are the people who have no chance whatsoever of ever winning a race. They're out there because they absolutely love it. And if I'm suffering for 6 hours, they're doing the same suffering, except they're doing it longer than I am. They're suffering for 10 hours. And, well, I shouldn't be overemphasizing suffering, because it's some people call it suffering and some people just call it experiencing. And but whatever.
Hey, Gene, you're talking to me. I will let you.
Yeah.
I will let you use the word suffering, because, and I have this conversation with a buddy of mine all the time he's a bit faster. He's definitely a bit thinner. I carry around about 210 pounds. So I tell him, you have no idea what it's like. You're going to go finish that marathon in 3.5, 4 hours. I'm going to be out there for 6.5, 7. It's a completely different challenge to it, but I've embraced it as part of the, part of my challenge and part of what makes me stronger. And, it does draw in a lot of the mental aspect of the sport.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You just never know until you try. And I mean, when I signed up for all these crazy, was I positive I could do 200 miles 3 months in a row? Of course not. But, it didn't matter because I was going to find out. And if you run 200 miles and only run 150 of them, you've had a 150-mile adventure. I mean, even failing is a great success out there. It's just no reason not to do something like that once you've reached a certain competency in ultra running. And really, it's not much more than 30 or 40 miles. I mean, once you can run that far, it's just a matter of slowing down and accommodating your body's lots of energy reserves. You can just keep on going.
Well, Gene, I will tell you that you make it sound very doable, and so I hope folks find that to be encouraging. And I like the fact that you say you're just an ordinary Joe without a coach. So maybe folks will be encouraged to find somebody that can help them. I loved what you said in the beginning about the coach, which I think is a huge piece of it for all of us, is just the accountability piece.
So the coaches are expensive. There are, cheaper ways to get instruction than hiring a personalized coach who's going to give you a program, just for you. For some people, I'd say it doesn't matter how expensive it is; it's worth it. For others, I'd say, you might want to wait on that until a time where you're more comfortable with it. But if you're the kind of person who can be held accountable without a single person looking over your shoulder, then there's lots of instruction you can get out there. And of course, as you and just about, there's some people who are loners, but for all of us, if you've got a little community that gets you out of bed and you can run with, that's really one of the best things of all, because you're going to get out there if you have to meet somebody.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's clearly the biggest hurdle, at least that I have faced, is just those voices in the morning or whenever it is trying to tell you that that was a good plan, but you really don't need to do it today. You can do it tomorrow, or you can just run a little longer on the weekend. Those excuses, those voices get pretty loud in this whole running thing. So I can see where a coach may help with that.
Okay, now I'd like to tick off maybe half your viewers. On a trail race, please don't wear headphones. I mean, I wear them in training. I wouldn't dream of wearing them in a marathon, but I know a lot of you are anyway. But please don't wear them on a trail race. You'll never run that trail again. Even if you do run the same trail, it's a different day. There's different sounds to hear, different things to think about while you're running. It's just an experience that you wouldn't want to transfer to listening to music that you've probably listened to 100 times before. So probably fell on deaf ears, but I have to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's appropriate for even the road. I have found that there are some days, and there are days definitely where the music helps get me through, especially if I'm just running through the boring side streets of town here where it gets pretty challenging. But I used to always wear music until somebody said, just try not wearing it. Try just taking in what's happening around you, and that made a lot of difference.
Hmm. Yeah, I used to tell my kids, if you have to listen to music while you're running, you don't have any thoughts worth listening to. So, but as you say, some workouts it just helps. But in my own defense, I find that frequently I can't even remember the last 5 songs that were on there because I'll be thinking about something else while I'm on them, and it's sort of a last ditch fallback, but never in a race. Never.
That's pretty quotable to me. The whole idea, if you have to listen to music, you don't have any thoughts worth listening to. That's powerful.
And there's lots to think about. One thought that most runners will have. Like an interesting question you might have asked is, what was your most memorable race experience? And it comes back to, well, what's that most common daydream that you have that you think about if you don't have music to listen to? Well, you probably think about, nipping somebody at the line, running for hours, and then finding that strength to pull it out at the finish line. Well, it's easy to daydream about those things, but can you really do it when the time comes? And I often wondered, do I have what it takes? And my most memorable race experience wasn't one of the races I've won, one of the records I've set. It was an 8K cross country race, and I think I finished 3rd or something. This was before I had my coach, or maybe it was just shortly after. But I had about a mile and a half to go, and I'd run a strong race, but those niggling little thoughts that get into your mind. Oh, you've run a good race. You can sort of ease up now, and you've got a race next weekend. You got to save it up. And so I'm beginning to back off. And then a guy in my age group passes me. So instantly, I'm on his back. And with a mile to go, he's made me pick it up over my comfort zone. But I decided then and there I was not going to let this guy beat me. And so I passed him by picking up the pace. And another quarter mile, I picked up the pace again. And then I picked up the pace again with another half mile to go. And it was just, I went into levels of the pain caves that I'm not sure I'll ever visit again. But I did what I dreamed about doing forever. I nipped this guy at the line, maybe 2 or 3 seconds. And that's helped in all other races. Even if I can't bring out that level of effort, I know that if I have to, that's deep within me. And that race, most valuable lesson I ever got.
And I think that story probably tells us an awful lot about you and how you're built and why you keep challenging yourself even more. It just sounds like there is a lot of drive inside you.
And if I hadn't spent all that time without earphones, maybe I wouldn't have dreamed that enough to motivate me. Who knows?
Well, Gene, I tell you what, this has been fascinating. It's been inspiring. Like I said, you write it off as it isn't about age, but the reality is, I think, one of the challenges we have in society is folks do get older, and I think culturally there's this expectation that they will slow down, and you've kind of told us, no, that's a cultural myth that you can buy into, but it's not a fact. So I think you are absolutely a great example for everybody, like you said, not just folks who are, getting up there in my age and looking down the road, but for everybody in terms of, culture dictates too much of what we're capable of doing. And then the reality is we have a lot more control over that than cultural ideas.
All right. Hope if I've inspired anybody out there, and I've talked a lot of people into doing that 50 mile. In fact, I think there are at least 6 or 7 people running that 50-mile trail race in Ithaca this year that I've talked into doing it, along with everybody else that I've talked into doing it who now do it every year. It's just something. It doesn't have to be that race, but go out there and pick something in the next race, another race you can look forward to. Even if it has to be a year ahead of time or a month ahead of time, whatever. Look forward to something. That'll keep you going.
Yeah, no. Well, I've got one next year, but I may look into that when I attempted the 35-mile Georgia Jewel last September, and that's the one I came up short on. So I'm signed up for the 50-miler there next year, and so I'm with the intention of doing a whole lot of running between now and then. So I may look into that Ithaca race. That sounds intriguing, and I sure hope I get to see you in Houston.
All right, I sure hope so. But we'll see. I have another race that same weekend that also I might be able to get into, and hope one of them works out. I'll let you know, and I'll be certainly looking forward to hearing what kind of trouble you get into yourself, having listened too long to me.
Yeah. You could be a dangerous guy for some people like me to talk to, because now I'm dreaming on down the road, and especially when I hear you starting the year with 250s, 100, and a 200.
Yeah, people often tell me I should wear a warning sign.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I may have to offer a warning as I introduce this podcast to folks. Listen at your own risk. You never know what you might be doing when you're done.
All right.
Hey, Gene, have a great day, buddy. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time.
Great talking with you, Keith.
All right, Gene. Have a great day.
Well, I hope you took away as much from that conversation with Gene Dykes as I did. Just really inspirational. When I reached out to Gene, like I said, I wanted to have a conversation about how a 70-year-old man can get out there and run a 2-hour and 54-minute marathon when this 54-year-old is out there struggling to get one done in 6 hours. But to my surprise, found out speed's not Gene's only real skill set there. He is, and maybe even a greater skill, is this capacity to get out there and run really long distances. When he talked about running 3 200-mile races back in 2017, that probably floored me a little bit more than my initial reaction to that 2-hour and 54-minute marathon. And as a guy myself out there really sticking my toes into the waters of the ultra world and the trail world, pretty inspiring to hear Gene's love. Really, you could hear this passion and love he had for the trails. Talked about put that music away when you're out there, at least on the trails. You're always going to hear something different every day, every mile. And I dare say I relate to that. I have experienced that really out on the trails. Like I said, I'll be going to Houston here in a couple of weeks to pound the concrete roads down there in the marathon. So I still like getting out there and challenging myself over some of those road distances, but I've truly fallen in love with the trails and the trail community. So it was really nice to hear Gene have this perspective, because I have found that in the trail community, it's kind of all in. These folks have, and it's not like they look down on the road community. They just have fallen in love with these trails, and that's kind of what they want to do. And you find the same thing over in the road racers, whether it's the marathon, half marathoners, or even down to the 5K, 10K racers. That's just kind of what they want to do. And a lot of times that's just what they have access to in their communities. The trails aren't everywhere. A lot of times you have to put in a little effort to drive and go find them. So that's just become kind of their area. But Gene may be the first guy I've found that really just seems to want to embrace all possibilities for
running, not just in surfaces, but then also the timed races and these long endurance races. I just really enjoyed this conversation with Gene Dykes. It's inspirational on a lot of layers. He pretty much tried to dismiss this whole age is just a number deal, that he doesn't feel like he's defying his age, that he's just more a guy who is bent on getting out of bed every day and doing what he's capable to do as a human being. And so I think that lesson really applies to us all. But I am a guy 54. I do see 70 approaching quickly. And we do have sort of this cultural expectation, falsely, that we decline in a lot of areas as we get older. We kind of self-fulfill that prophecy that we're going to be able to do less the older we get. And Gene really makes it pretty clear through his own life and the way he lives that that doesn't have to be the case. With some work and putting in the effort in the areas that you're passionate about, those places, they don't have to face the natural decline that culture likes to expect of us. So he has helped me build some really new expectations into at least my running life. And then, on a broader scale, thinking about it, life in general, that things don't necessarily all have to go downhill as I round the corner of 54, head to 55, and then whatever the ages are down the road. So I appreciated that sort of insight from Gene, and just his sort of debunking or pushing me back when I wanted to say this is a story about a 70-year-old man doing things that 70-year-olds shouldn't be able to do. That wasn't his story. And so he helped shape a new look at my own story. So thank you, Gene, for that. Thank you all for coming in and listening to this conversation with Gene today. I hope you'll come back again another day. And until then, get out there and run. I hope listening to Gene maybe inspired you to get out there and put a couple steps in front of the other and test this running thing. If you're not a runner, if you are, hopefully maybe it inspired you to work at it a little differently, maybe a little harder. If you're not a runner, get out there and cheer somebody else on, maybe who is. And if you're not interested in this whole running thing at all, well, keep coming back. I think guys like Gene have some stories to share that you don't necessarily have to be a runner to find some value in them. So thanks for listening in today. Until next time, you all have a great day.
Despite the setting sun.